Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the series that we're doing right now from the book that myself and Dr. Jay Smith have been talking about. And here is this book that we've been referring to. It's the 20 examples of correction in early Quran manuscripts. And of course, as we mentioned, this is our dear brother Daniel Brubaker, who has done his PhD dissertation on the topic. And this is just a sample of some of the corrections that he uncovered as part of his research. And we're not talking only 20 that he came across. At least when he finished his research, it was 800. Now it's in the thousands. And that's why we wanted to take advantage of the fact that his new book is out, and we wanted to promote it for him, encourage all of you to go and get a copy of it and see for yourself some of these issues that we are assessing for you here in the show and criticizing basically the Quranic manuscripts, not the work of Dan, because he is reporting what his findings are. We're trying to do a critical assessment of the Quranic authenticity, accuracy, perfection, and completion based on these discussions. And of course, no better person to do this with me other than my dear brother, Dr. Jay Smith. Jay, welcome back, brother.
Al-Fadi, thank you. This has been exciting. We've been having, actually, what we're really looking at is to see if there's any human intervention. Is there any intentional corrections? Have humans actually changed the script, manipulated, accreted it, erased it, in some cases covered it. So these are why Dan really wrote this teaser, and it is a teaser. It's to get people kind of get them ready for what he's really going to put out, and that will be his tome for not only his doctor, but as you say, now it's in the thousands, and these will continue to accumulate. Now, what we stopped with number 13. Now let's go zip right into number 14.
That's
so let's
correct.
put that up, and let's look at number 14. And here is an eraser. From the top copy. This is the top copy that the Muslims love the most. This is the one they assume is the standard bearer of all the archaic manuscripts, and we're finding it's not the one you really should have used. Now, this is Surah 4, Ayah 167, and you can see, look at number 1, the green arrow. Take a look at the green arrow, which is right in the middle. And you will see there's an eraser there. Can you see? It's very faint. It's an eraser of the first letter of Allah, okay? There is the Aleph of the first letter of Allah. That's the green arrow. Now come down to number 2, the blue arrow. And here is the second eraser on the next line, which shows the shadow of what was first written. So you can still, it wasn't a very good erasing. They didn't do a very good job, which was Allahi. Good. Which is Allah has already. There's the blue arrow. So we can actually read it because they just didn't do a good enough job of getting rid of it. And then we jump up to the yellow arrow. That's number 3. The arrow number 3 is another eraser, and this is found on number 10. But we don't know. We haven't really looked into this yet. So we're going to come. That's something that Dan has yet to do. And he realizes there's an awful lot of work to do. So we're getting into thousands now. But what we know, and if you look at the original, what it did say before the erasures was, surely those who disbelieve and hinder from the way of Allah have strayed far into error. Because if they've erased it, it now says, surely those who disbelieve and hinder from the way have strayed far into error. Now, that's odd because that does not correspond with the Hafs 1924 text.
Which is the standard text that is used today.
They should have kept it as it was. They shouldn't have erased this one.
Right.
And that's fascinating because most of the ones that we've looked up so far, the first 14 that we've looked at, they have added Allah to it to correspond with the Hafs 1924 text. In this case, they erased it without thinking through, hold on a minute, this now goes away from the text and does them a disfavor. So standardization, what happened to the standardization? It goes out the window.
Right. And obviously, this indicates clearly it's a human intervention, lack of communication, and making adjustments for whatever reason.
In this case, they shouldn't have.
That's right. And I want to just point one thing, and of course it will be studied later. Notice that the verse endings, you can tell clearly that they were added at a later time, or at least they were some writings on top of them, because as you can see right here, it's a strange thing usually to have it done this way.
Okay, that's a medallion. That's
right.
Explain what you mean by medallions.
I mean, the medallions, by the way, they do verse endings. Sometimes they have a different system. Like every 5 verses, they have 1, and every 10, and every 50, and sometimes they go every 100. But those medallions just indicated like here is an end of a package, or of a group of verses.
Of an idea.
Exactly.
Which is fascinating because versification, this is called versification,
That's right,
is not standard even today.
That is correct. There's differences in that as well.
When we say Surah 4, Ayah 167, which is on the screen there, and you open up the Quran in your home, if you have it in your home, it may not be at verse 167. It could be verse 166 or 165. You have to sometimes go read 5 verses before and 5 verses after to find out which one you're talking about, because there is still today not even any standardization.
The easy thing is look at Warsh and Hafs, and you'll see the difference right there.
Okay, let's go on to number 15, and here is another eraser. This is an eraser leaving a gap. This is from Doha. This is the one we looked at, the MIA, and it's Surah 24 or chapter 24, verse 33. Let's start with the green arrow. This is at the end of the line. The green arrow shows where they've erased at the end of the line. And then go down to the blue arrow. That's the next line after it. And there's the beginning of the next line. So the eraser begins the line where the green arrow is and continues where the blue arrow is. And it occurs after the word fadlihi. What's that mean?
I mean, His grace, His provisions, His, generosity.
Okay, and it goes before Aladina. So,
that's right.
And those who. So you can see that there is something in between Fadlihi and wa Aladina. We don't know what they are. There's no way to know that because they've erased it. This way, they did a thorough job of erasing it, right. Unlike the one when we looked at number 14, where you could see exactly what they had erased. So here are cases where it's obvious that there was quite a few words that were erased. There was quite a few letters that have been taken out. And now, obviously, it now fits the Hafs 1924 text.
Right.
Okay, now let's go to number 16, because number 16 is an insertion, and we're moved into the Husayni text. This is the Husayni manuscript, which is in the Cairo Mosque, the Musaf al-Sharif, as it's called. And this Husayni manuscript, Surah 4, Ayah 33. Now, the kana was omitted when this manuscript was first written. However, look and see where the green arrow is. Take a look where the green arrow is, and you'll see only 2 letters, the first 2 letters of kana are there.
That's right.
And that's interesting. We know the kana should be there. Whoever put those letters, and you can tell they're at a later date. How can you tell that they're written at a later date?
I mean, it's the very small writing, different style of writing. The pen that was used also is different, and it's an insertion. It's clearly,
it's clearly an insertion. Yeah. But either they got lazy, or they went to sleep, or they got called to dinner. They didn't finish the last letters, and so you can see that they were maybe they were just hesitant. Maybe you said, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe this is not a good idea." So fascinating that you see that kind of insertions, which is not a very well done insertion. Obviously, it's in the wrong place. But if they had got the entire word there, kana, then it would say, and Allah has power over all things, which is what we found in the 1924 Hafs text that was created in Cairo and made official in Egypt in 1936 and then made official around the world in 1985, 34 years ago.
Yeah, so this is kind of like an affirmative, basically, statement saying that He is indeed has power over all things. And I can tell you that, one of the possibilities, this is a formulaic, basically verse that is repeated over and over again. And it's quite possible the scribe thought it should be that way based on his own knowledge of others. And then maybe he discovered that shouldn't be, and maybe he didn't know how to erase it.
Okay, halfway through he said, oops. Wait.
Exactly.
Or maybe he didn't get authority from those who are above him.
That too.
We have no idea. But it's fascinating because that shows that even when they try to correct it, they don't always get it correct. Yeah. Number 17. Here we're looking at the NLR, the National Library of Russia, the Marcel number 11, and we're looking at Surah 33, verse 9. And all but the first 2 letters of the Ni'mat Allah, the favor of Allah, have been written over. Say it again?
Ni'matullah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. And it's that have been written over an eraser. You can see that there's an eraser underneath. You can see it's written in a different ink. It's written with a different nib, and of course, it's done by a different scribe, and it's also bunched together. It's not as big as the other letters around it, later words around it, so it's been bunched together. So the original would be ni'matihi, his favor.
Ni'mati, yeah. No.
But now the current is ni'mat Allah, the favor of Allah.
Yeah, so here there is a classic example of changing that inseparable personal pronoun, the ha in this case, the ending, and indicating that this ni'matuhu, the ha here applies to Allah. So they did that, and there's a number of examples that Dan talks about in relation to this.
Yeah, and to be fair, Dan loves to look at the ones where Allah has been added. Here's another case of that. Yeah. It now conforms with the 1924 Hafs text. Let's go to the next one, 18. 18 is, again, the National Library of Russia. It's Marcel, the collection, Marcel's collection, number 7, Surah 6, Ayah 40. Look where the green arrow is, and you can see the word the hour has been written above the line. Now, why is it you can tell that this is a later edition?
Again, you look at the nib, narrower. It's obvious that it was inserted in an odd space, different writing style, and many other things, that indicate that.
Now, obviously, you can see that this may have been just a clumsy mistake, because the original would say, it says, "Say, tell me if Allah's torment comes upon you, or comes upon you, would you then call upon?" That doesn't make sense, even grammatically doesn't make sense. So now with the hour, it says, "Say, tell me if Allah's torment comes upon you, or the hour comes upon you." And you can see it was obviously they had to stick this in there at a later date. It now conforms with the 1924 Hafs text. Let's go to number 19. And this one, in some ways, back again to Allah again. This is from the National Library of Russia, Marcel, Volume 5 this time. And here you have Surah 34, verse 27. Now, what's fascinating, you have two words here, Huwa Allah. Which means what?
He is Allah, or he is God.
Okay, and you can see the huwa is out in the margin.
That's right.
So this is obviously a later edition. You can see that the text looks different. The scribe, you can tell it's written by a different scribe. In fact, it looks like a rather scratchy writing. It looks like the person was nervous when they wrote it. It's not very smooth like the other letters around it. We have no idea what they erased. Obviously, they erased something.
I mean, it could be erased innahu to replace it hu Allah to make it clearer. It's possible. That's a possibility, but we don't know. But something was there that they did not like.
Yeah, and obviously, you can see this now, as we've been saying over and over and over again, this now is standardized. This is now conforms it to the canonical text,
right.
The 1924 Hafs text.
That's right.
Now, I want to bring in one more before we get to the big one, but that we'll probably do for another episode. Let's just bring number 20, which is the last one he has in his book,
sure.
Before he gets to the additional one that he has added. And this is an erasure overwritten of nearly a full line. Now we're not just talking a word here, a word there, erasing
it was
here.
Inserted.
This is an entire line that has been inserted over a long erasure. This
right.
is from the Doha manuscript.
Right.
And it is Surah chapter 8, verse 3, Surah 8,
and we want to
verse 8.
underline it so people can see what we mean. Right.
Take a look. Look at that green line that Al-Fadi has just written. That's how much has been erased. That's a huge amount that has been erased. Now, there's no way that we can find out what used to be there. Currently, it now says, and out of what we have provided them, they spend. And you can read it right there in the Arabic. Why don't you read it in Arabic so you can see what they've written over top?
Because apparently they wanted to either to add, theologically speaking, something in here, or they wanted to match a current reading, for instance.
Well, the reading that I see there is wa mimma razaqnahum.
وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Out of what we have given them or provided to them, they are spending.
And you can also see at the very far left, you can see that the initial alif of the following verse is also added. So that had been missing, or it got erased by accident because they were a little bit too rambunctious.
Right.
They had to add that into. You can see it belongs to this later this later scribe, and it's the same color and the same size
That's
as
right.
the
I mean,
later
it's very
scribe.
clear that the ink is darker, which means it's more fresh, more newer in age than the other ink.
We're going to end with that now because the next one, which is one of the most damaging, I would really like to save for another episode.
Absolutely, because we want you to take your time, we want to take our time assessing it, and we want our audience to benefit from it.
Daniel has done us a great favor, and I love what he has done by starting out with this teaser, by coming out with this book here that we can all now get. Yeah. It's fascinating to me that somebody from the United States who has to do his doctorate in this area is the one who is actually coming up with these corrections, when these corrections have been there for years, for decades, in some cases for centuries.
Absolutely. And, I want to give credit to the early Islamic scholars. While they didn't talk a whole lot about corrections, they at least took the liberty of talking about different readings and different way of presenting, ideas or phrases. And it seems to me, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, from my own research and findings, that the early Muslims did not really look that dogmatic when it came to the Quran. There was a process of fluidity, of progressively editing and correcting, and we've seen examples of how careless it was, because they're not trying really to cover up a whole lot of things, and maybe they didn't view the Quran the way our current Muslims are viewing it.
And I wouldn't even say it's the current. I would say that this all probably comes out in the 10th and 11th century when Ibn Hazm started confronting the Bible over this very thing.
That's right.
It really comes out in the 11th century, and 1064 is when he introduces this idea that the previous scriptures have been corrupted,
right,
because he had a chance. He was probably the first one. That's almost 400 years after the fact that he finally looked at the biblical text and he noticed that it was different than the Quranic text. So he immediately says, the problem is the corruption of the earlier text. So once you make that accusation against the previous scriptures, then you're going to have to make sure that your scriptures don't have this problem.
Correct.
So now you can understand why this became an apologetic, not just a polemic. The polemic is out there. Once you put the polemic against the others, you're going to have an apologet against yourself. The earliest scribes didn't have that polemic. The earliest scribes, the ones who are the authors of these manuscripts that we're looking at, all the ones that put these manuscripts together, they just assumed that things would be changing. They just assume that these are things as you find better ones. They just assume as you start bringing other manuscripts and other schools together that they're going to have to make these changes. That's the one theory, and you're bringing it up. I would suggest there's even another theory, because this is why we have been repeating the same phrase over and over again.
Amen.
There is need for a standardization, but you cannot have a standardization unless you have a standard.
That's right. And this is the reason why we have these theories, is like it shows the need really to do more and more research, textual criticism, studies on the Quran, so that we can continue to solidify maybe a viable theory behind why this was done. Nevertheless, what we're seeing so far is so damaging to what we began with, the assumptions that it's eternal and created, perfect, complete, and it's identical to what we have in our hand today.
And unchanged. It is failing on every one of those
Absolutely.
letters. No,
Absolutely.
God would not make these kind of mistakes, so it's not eternal. Certainly, if you sent it down to Muhammad, why did he send it down so piecemeal with so many incorrections? And then, obviously, Uthman, if he was one that canonized it, if he had burned everything and that disagreed, well, he missed quite a few. If that were the case, I would say that that's probably spurious. But more so, why did Mujahid? Why didn't he get the seven readings? We know that the seven readings have nothing to do with what we're looking at.
That's true. And the fundamental question is, who authorized Uthman or Ibn Mujahid or any of those who decided that the reading should be this way or that way? By what authority they are able to determine what is in heaven?
Yeah. Okay.
And with that, we are coming to the conclusion of this episode. We definitely are excited to do the other episode concerning this big, correction that we will be talking about.
One of the most damaging that I have
Absolutely.
seen, and I'm so glad that Dan is putting it in there. He's putting it as an augment and almost an addendum, but what an addendum.
Amen. Well, thank you, brother, as always. And what a joy, of course, to do this with you and to even serve the Lord with our dear brother Daniel Brubaker. Once again, I want to remind everybody this is a book you should have in your library. And this is a book you should use when you are having a discussion with your Muslim friends. We want to, of course, emphasize to everybody, including our Muslim friends, we're not here to attack you. We're here to share with you facts that, as Jay mentioned, they've been readily available for centuries, actually. Shame on those that hid them from you, did not even bother to tell you that such a thing exists until a man from the U.S. have to fly over to these locations, take photos of them, and tell you that, look what your early manuscripts have. And with that said, we need to pray for our Muslim friends that the Lord will open their hearts to the truth and they will begin to examine the book that they're following, just like we want them to examine the man that brought it. With that said, God bless you. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, hit the bell so that you don't miss future videos. And please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Sira International. And together we can introduce Muslims to the gospel of Jesus Christ.